He said, may I challenge you? And I said, sure. And he said, ask the Lord to give you a vision beyond your resources, beyond your financial means, your personal capital, and your education, beyond what you know, who you know, and what you have, so that he gets the glory, not you and God. That prayer of, Lord, give me a vision beyond your resources, it wasn't just about the book. It's setting the stage for even deeper waters that he's led me into. So when Homeworthy contacted me, someone had given the CEO of Homeworthy my book, and she had been a producer of Good Morning America and had left to start Homeworthy. And for those who aren't familiar with Homeworthy, they go into homes all over the world. I'm like, Lord, I couldn't stand up in front of 2 people before practicing law, and you have me filming in my kitchen every week. You know what I'm saying? So it's just been a crazy, only God story. When you have the courage to pray that prayer, he will take you to places you are not enough. And that's the whole purpose. For you to understand the mighty God you serve, he plans on doing things through you and with you that you can't even wrap your head around.
Welcome to the One Pebble Podcast. Listeners, YouTube watchers, it brings me tremendous joy to introduce Ruth McKeaney today. Ruth is a brand new friend of mine in just the last couple years. I don't even know her that well, but I was immediately drawn to her presence, and I'm going to explain a lot more of what that means. Ruth is the mom to 5 beautiful children. She loves being a mother more than anything. She is the wife to Bob. Ruth is a Christ follower, and Ruth has an absolutely amazing life that I'm so excited for you all to hear about. What I'm drawn to most about Ruth is her heart for Christ, and she's really using her life personally and professionally to advance the kingdom. I have to tell you something so amazing about her. She used to be an assistant attorney general, a trial lawyer, and then she has flipped 16 houses. I believe she now lives in a home that she is her and her husband are the 4th person on the deed. And she's going to tell us all about her story. An amazing story that you'll hear about Ruth is she was sat down by her uncle, and her uncle asked her one of the most important questions of her life, but that also led her to writing a book, Hungry for Home. She has her own show hosted by Ruth. This humble woman has 201,000 followers on Instagram. Now, I know her heart well enough to know it's not about the numbers. It's not about the followers. But for Ruth, it's about making a difference in the lives of others. And there's so much more I could say. But Ruth, it's a tremendous joy. I'm super excited. There's going to be so much we're going to talk about today. Creating culture and families. We're going to talk about slowing down. We're going to hear your story. We're going to hear all about your book and so much more. It means the world to me for you to share on the One Pebble podcast. I admire you. I don't know you that well, and I'm excited to get to know you better, but you are so humble. There's not a pretentious bone in your body. And what you're made up of is making a difference in the lives of others. And so we celebrate you today. Thank you for being on the podcast.
What an honor to be here. Thank you for asking me.
Thank you. Before we hear your story, there's just something that I want to ask you right off the bat that I was really drawn to. You are a believer in setting family culture. And for people that are listening here in the United States, we have a lot of listeners across the world. Sometimes people don't have a family. Sometimes they're a single person or they're a widower. Some of the people listening have means. Some people don't have means. But I think whether it's family members or neighbors or communities, Ruth, you're such a believer in creating relationships, furthering relationships, spending time with loved ones, slowing down, and creating culture. I just want to hear your heart before we go into your story. Kick us off with the importance, it's right before Christmas time, on family culture and slowing down.
It's interesting. I often say to people, be intentional about creating your family culture. And I've had friends say, well, I don't have a family culture. And I start to laugh because everyone does. The question is if you're intentional about it or not. And it doesn't mean, whether you're single, married, kids out of the house, you're an empty nester. It all has to do with blessing people in and through your home. And, historically, my history, my heritage is my grandfather. And I'm just going to take it back because you'll understand what became so formative in my life. My father grew up all over the world. And my grandfather and my great uncle and Billy Graham and Bob Pierce and another gentleman had a Bible study for years. Out of that Bible study was birthed BGA, World Vision, Youth for Christ, and Navigators. So my grandfather took Asia with his 6 kids, and whether it was Sumatra, Hong Kong, China, until my dad was 17, they lived overseas. And my grandmother's best friend was Corrie ten Boom. And so I lived with my grandparents for a season, our family did, and through the home were people from all over the world. And I remember thinking to myself, wow, do they know how lucky they are? They get to come spend their sabbatical with us and we just care for them. And I had absolutely no understanding until I was older how formative it was for me and for my siblings to watch people be blessed from all over the world, from every kind of culture, from every different kind of religion, come in and be loved well. So that started my journey and my heart for wanting a home like that.
That's incredible. And Corrie ten Boom, that's just amazing that from Billy Graham to Corrie ten Boom, I mean, think of how generational this is to you and how important this is to you.
Yeah.
Give us some tips, and I know that you and Bob have taken time together in your marriage to say, what is our family culture going to be like, and what is the feelings of our home going to be like? And the other thing I think, oftentimes I think my own family and people around me, we don't need to be perfect. Families aren't perfect, and you don't have to think about a family culture and a mission statement. You don't have to wait to be perfect. No family is ever going to be perfect. And to step into that.
I was being interviewed, I think it might have been for the Country Home magazine. They had a Christmas edition a couple years ago. And I remember being asked, what do you say to all the people who think you have the perfect home and the perfect life? And I actually started crying during that interview because our job, what Bob and I have worked so hard to do, was to create a safe place to be imperfect in. And that became something very important to us as a couple. So as you said earlier, I used to be an assistant DA. Then I was an assistant attorney general, got married when I was 30. And when Bob and I got married, an older gentleman who was mentoring him took us both out to dinner and said, can we give you some counsel? And they said, sit down as a couple and determine what your mission is. Who do you want to be? Who do you want your family to be? Because they will be something. They will be known for something. And that starts with the two of you. So I took that very seriously to think, okay, I don't mean to jump to a whole nother thing, but we were just reading a book with one of my brothers for one of my sons about a coach who said, okay, everybody give me your goal. All the players hand their goals into him and he threw them in the trash. And he then went on to say, I want you to write down 3 things you are going to commit to achieve that goal. Because ultimately, you can't just say that's my goal without a means to achieve it. So for me, that conversation with that gentleman, when he said, what's your mission statement? Basically, it was what was your goal as a family? So we had to come up with ways to achieve it. And whether it was reading nightly as a family once we had kids, or creating certain family traditions that would draw us together. I mean, by the time I was in my mid-20s, we'd already moved over 20 times. So to me, I knew what had been grounding to me, the oldest of 6, wasn't place, but it was the culture my parents had created. So that's how we entered our marriage.
I love that, Ruth. And I think we're always pushing back against the world. The world says to accomplish more, to be busier. And my intent isn't to sound negative, but we have to push back and really take a look at what is our family culture? What do we want our family mission statement to be? And I believe that with your 5 kids, I believe you have 4 girls, and your son is the youngest in high school. Can you speak to what your family culture, give the listeners an example of what your family culture is today?
Today, well, I can tell you how we got here. First of all, just for the listeners, the first year of our marriage, we moved 9 times in a year. So it started out running pretty fast and hard, and we had moved to Philadelphia. So I had gone from being a trial lawyer on a certain trajectory to being a stay-at-home wife, not even a mom, because I didn't have a daughter at that point. And we had to figure it out because financially we didn't have the means at that point. I was waiting to waive into the bar exam. So I say all this to say, and maybe you don't want me to get into the story at this point, but where we are now, given what we had to do for 16 years, was we definitely, home and family is our priority behind faith. And watching my girls and my son walk that out, whether they're out of college, in college, or at home, is pretty beautiful. We also value working very, very hard. And you'll hear that part of our story of how hard we had to work and how we did it as a family. So I think, when you ask what that culture is now, we love hard, we work hard, and we play hard. We're very intentional about our time together, which is, more limited as the kids get older. And I love it. I love watching my kids begin to start their own traditions in their marriage now that mimic ours. So that's where we're at.
Ruth, I really admire how much intentionality you've put into family culture and how much you've inspired other people to really think about that. And I think with Christmas around the corner, it's the perfect time for people to really take a step back. And we're going to talk more about that with your book here in the coming minutes. But, what are your traditions? What is the feeling of the home? What is our culture currently? What do we want it to be? And I think I want to remind people, don't wait for perfect. Give yourself grace. Don't beat yourself up. Start tomorrow, start next month, and really be thinking about what is that family mission statement, or even again for single people, what is the mission statement of their life? What do they want that culture to be? And this doesn't have to be heavy. It can be exciting and light. And this is like so cool, Ruth.
I'll get practical with you right now. Okay. So to me, the Christmas season is anticipation, right? It was anticipation of Christ's birth. It's anticipation of what we celebrate every Christmas. So I started out as anticipation. So Thanksgiving, from that day on, we have 2 doors that go into our dining room. We wrap them like giant presents. The door is completely a present with a giant bow, paper, everything.
Wow.
Nobody is allowed in the dining room from Thanksgiving to Christmas because that's the wrapping station. But everyone who walks outside of that room knows what's going on in that, out in the room. And so again, it creates an anticipation of what's coming. One of the things we value is the term others. And I actually have a ring that I've had made for every child that says others, that my great uncle had made these plaques. But Christmas Eve, we make about 400 cinnamon rolls that my great aunt used to make for Reagan when he was governor of California. She was a chef. And we deliver 400 cinnamon rolls to families around the city.
Amazing.
We come back on Christmas Eve, and we still do this, even though 2 of my kids are out of college and married. 2 are in college and one's in high school. We come back, we have on our best china with candlelit, we have Chinese food, And then we all go into the living room where we all take sleeping bags. We watch White Christmas, and all 9 of us sleep together in the living room. And we wake the next morning, and there is a specific gift that's always at the foot of every sleeping bag. It's the first thing they can open. The night before, because we have read as a family for 25 years, we read out loud. They open a gift the night before. It's the book of the year that we're going to read, the game of the year that we're going to play. And I always take one of my favorite photos of the year, and I have it make it into a huge puzzle. So those are things to start out Christmas and Christmas Eve. But again, what works for my family may not work for somebody else's. I think the key is how you can slow down time enough where your time together becomes the focus, not the gifts, not the beauty of Christmas, but the feeling it draws out from you.
Ruth, that's really been on my heart lately. And before we hear your whole story, let's just talk a little bit more about slowing down. Ruth, that is not something I'm good at, but when I spend quiet time with the Lord and when I hear the Holy Spirit speak in my life, He is reminding me, Kristine, slow down. You're going to miss moment. I'm going to miss what He's trying to tell me. I really have to work hard at slowing down, and I'll be the first to put myself in the boat that's something that is hard for me and I need to work on. But there again, and I want this podcast to be really light and exciting, and Christmas is right around the corner, but it's the perfect time. What can you say? You've got a lot, you're still young, Ruth, but you've got a lot of years under your belt. You rub shoulders. You're not going to tell people this, but I'm going to tell people this. You rub shoulders with famous people. Like, you are so humble. I already said there's not a pretentious bone in your body. All your work personally and professionally goes back to advancing the kingdom, but tons of people are pulling for your time. Everybody wants a slice of Ruth. What can you tell us about slowing down? How do you speak to the importance of slowing down and the importance of relationships? At the end of the day, it's just people, and we have to slow down.
So first of all, I'm going to tell you I'm not perfect at this. In fact, it's a weakness of mine. I mean, I had to pay for my own college and law school, so I've worked full time since I was 15. Working is deep in me. That being said, my mom used to tell me, Ruth, your speed hides your sin. There's no time for you to reflect. There's no time for you to, reflect is the big word. And so, like you, I know my weakness, right? And so particularly at this time of year, and I'm going to point out, I had 5 athletes. I had 4 college athletes. Like, this isn't, I didn't have a slow, quiet house. I had 4 kids born in 5 years, and then my 5th was 3 years later. So slowing down had to start at the top, and that had to start with me. I started it because we weren't going to get time with Bob if we didn't do it. We were working so hard at the time. And that, again, goes into the story that I'll tell later. But that's when I said, okay, we're going to read. We couldn't get all of us around the table at any given time necessarily. So I could have said, well, it's impossible for our family, right? We're athletes, we're, students, it's impossible. And I didn't. I said, okay, if we can't get it then, we're going to get it another time. So we carved out 45 minutes a night before the kids went to bed where we read and we talked about the day. And I think when we talk about intention and slowing down, life will take over if you don't control it. In our culture, and we live in an area where success and productivity are held to such a degree that it's hard not to get sucked right into it. And so I've pulled my kids back for a very long time and said, at the end of the day, that's not what you're going to value. And you have to make those hard choices as parents, because it's easy to get, caught up in their successes as well. And so I think that they would all agree that they are very thankful that we made some of the decisions we made as a family. But we decide back in basically at the beginning of October, what do we want the next 2 months to look like, knowing they're going to be gone in a blink of an eye? What are the things we want to make sure we accomplish? What are the things we want to be very mindful of and protect? This past season, there was about 5 straight months until the beginning of November where I've never been that busy in my life. And I had to sit down and say, wait a second. At the end of the day, what am I trying to tell people? How can I go against everything I'm saying? So it means saying yes to the right things. There's a lot of good things out there, but what are the right things? And then for me, asking the Lord, please shut the things down that I don't need to be involved in. Yeah.
Ruth, you've given me goosebumps, partly because my speed is my sin too. I just go and go and go, and I need to slow down and take more time to reflect. Thank you for speaking truth to us. Ruth, I have to tell you, I'm just going to brag a little bit more, and then we're going to hear your story. So I pull up Instagram and the Tuesday tips. Oh my gosh, listeners, you wait. So Ruth is in her kitchen and she's talking about, the smell of your house, and she's talking about decorating, and she's talking about this and talking about that. You're going to be so inspired watching her on Instagram, but she also has her own show, and I'm excited for you to talk about that. She wrote a book, Hungry for Home, that's super inspiring. Talk about making you think about family culture and traditions and recipes. But those are just a few examples, but that was many, many years in the making. So the Ruth today, the Lord, if I could speak for you, had you on this huge journey. And Ruth has also lost her mom 20 plus years ago. We're going to talk more about today, but take us back. Don't hold back. We're proud of you, and what you've done all along has been steps to the kingdom work that you're doing today. And the other part of this podcast, Ruth, is people stepping out in courage and looking at your story and getting to know you. You just keep saying yes, and you keep saying yes, and you keep saying yes, and you put good people around you. And it's really inspiring for all of us as we consider our next yes. So would you start from the beginning? Don't feel like you're bragging. You go, girl. Tell us that story.
Well, as I said, I got married at 30. And within 2 months of getting married, my husband says, I'd like to go work for my father in Pennsylvania. And I was on a trajectory. I really wanted to become a judge. So this was going to shake things up quite a bit. And my mentor at the time later became a Virginia Supreme Court judge. But at the time, he was a Court of Appeals judge. And he took me to lunch. And at lunch, he throws out in the middle of the table the Newsweek magazine. And on the cover, it said, family businesses they fail when you pass generations. The percentage is very high. And he says, does your husband know what you're giving up? And I said, oh, yes, but I just want to be a stay-at-home mom. Like I had this, my mom had been a stay-at-home mom to 6 of us. I knew ultimately that's what I wanted to do. I had absolutely no understanding of what that meant. And that couple I told you about earlier that took us out also said, Ruth is going to have a major identity crisis. And I started laughing. Bob started laughing. And I said, oh, no, you don't know who I am then. Well, we get to Philadelphia. And like I said, we lived in 9 places our first year. I waved into the bar, but at the time I was also pregnant. So we decided that I wouldn't go back to work. Well, we met with a realtor and she said, how much can you afford? And we told her, and she burst out laughing. And she said, you can't afford to live here on the main line. And that was the end of our meeting. She called us 2 weeks later and she said, "Are you afraid of hard work?" And both of us said, "Oh no, we're incredibly hardworking." Well, she took us to a house that was 150 years old and sliding off the foundation. And she said, "This is what you guys can afford." And I started crying. And Bob said, "Let's go to Home Depot and learn how to do this." 18 months later, that realtor came back and said, "I can double your money." We sold. We bought another 150-year-old house. 18 months later, doubled our money. We started to do this. We moved every 18 months for 16 years. During that time, in 5 years, we had 4 daughters. And then 3 years later, we had Anders. So when I tell you, and these aren't cosmetic changes to houses. We are taking houses down to the studs. Whoever takes the shower has to wash the dishes in the bathtub because we have no kitchen. When Bob would watch all the baby girls, I'd come back and he has given each one a hammer and nails and they're just hammering into the ground. It was when I love that the Lord doesn't show you in advance what he's getting ready to have you watch, right? Because I don't know that we'd have the courage to do it. And
that's perfect.
16 years we do this. And a friend, my mom had died, and my closest friend said, "There's a home that's on the market that my husband and I are going to go look at. We want it for investment reasons. It's 307 years old. William Penn deeded it. We're going to go look at it." She called me at midnight and said, "I walked on the property. The Lord said it's for you and Bob." And I said, "Heather, they want double what we can afford." She said, "I'm watching your kids in the morning. You go there." So Bob and I came on this property, and we had wanted a place that had a guest house because my mom had died. And we wanted a place that my dad could stay in. And this had 2 guest houses. Well, we walk on the property, and when I tell you trees were growing into the 3rd floor, in the chandelier in the dining room was still candles. It's that. There were no photos online about it. That tells you what bad shape it was. And so Bob said, "I'm going to offer half of what they're asking." He offers half. They take it. We closed on both houses 3 weeks later, and we came over here to live. So this became like our crown jewel. It's amazing property. And the Lord gave us the ability to get through it. But I often say that first transition, when we first moved to Philadelphia and we had moved 9 times, I remember I went into we were living with my in-laws at one point, and she had a field near the house, and I went into the field and I screamed at the top of my lungs. And I said, "God, can you see me now?" There was just that sense of an identity crisis. Who am I? What's my value? It was in all this. And now who am I? So this is what I would call my identity crisis number 2. And this is what you're referring to with Uncle Hubert's question. So my daughter, my oldest, had gone to college, and I began to feel the earth shifting underneath my feet. It was like the tectonic plates moving. And had you asked me, "Ruth, are your children your identity?" I would have said, "No, the Lord is, of course." I had no idea what I was talking about. And here I am struggling with that, going through perimenopause, and I am a mess because I knew I wasn't going to go back to being a trial lawyer. I'm getting weary of flipping houses. And who was I going to be? Well, Uncle Hubert happened to be visiting me. And I was in the kitchen baking cookies. I remember exactly what I was doing. And he called me from the living room and he said, "Ruthie, come sit with me on the couch." I go sit on the couch and he said, "May I ask you a very, very personal question?" And I said, "Of course, Uncle Hubert." He said, "What are you 100% dependent on the Lord for right now?" And I said, "Besides raising all my kids?" And he said, "Yes." I said, "Nothing." He said, "I know." He said, "You and Bob are so good at what you do that you've left no room for God to get the glory and for you to see him work." He said, "May I challenge you?" And I said, "Sure." And he said, "Ask the Lord to give you a vision beyond your resources, beyond your financial means, your personal capital, and your education, beyond what you know, who you know, and what you have, so that he gets the glory, not you and Bob." So I mean, the Lord's timing for everything, right, is so perfect. Because even at that time, I remember sitting there saying, Lord, did you waste all my training? Is nothing in my past life, like, I'm not going to practice law again. I'm not going to flip houses. Is all of that, like, now I'm on to another chapter and all of that's gone? And what he does next, I sit there and say, he wastes nothing. I'll tell you what, I was in law school, and in law school, they do something called the Socratic method, where they call on you and you stand in front of the 100 students or whatever it is, and they drill you with questions for 2 hours, just you.
Wow.
That first week of law school, I'm called on by the dean. I pass out. I wake up in another room. And at graduation, a bunch of the professors handed me a helmet and said, for the girl that will never be a trial lawyer. Well, guess what I did? And guess what he grew in me, not for the purposes of practicing law, but so that I could speak to people about what he's done for the last 20 years. So I get very teary when I talk about it, because he wastes nothing for anybody. And he intends to profit even from those areas of deep sorrow and failure. And so anyways, that's what happened. That's what starts my journey. And, I can go into what happened after that if you'd like me to.
Please do.
Okay. So Uncle Hubert challenges me that, and I'm asked to come to a women's conference up in Connecticut. It's a Women Doing Well event, which helps women determine their purpose, what they're passionate about, and a plan around that. And I went with my best friend, and we were sitting at a table with, a woman who's become one of my very dear friends, Sally Lloyd Jones, who wrote the, Storybook Bible, and women who are rock stars in fields of business. And I just remember sitting at the table saying, I don't belong here, number one, and what are we doing here? And they had a panel of C-suite women on the stage. And one of them said they were leaving their business to go work in ministry. And she said, I could do a spreadsheet in my sleep. I wouldn't even know how to make a charcuterie board. I get in the car with my best friend and I'm crying because I said, Heather, the only thing in this world I'm passionate about is family and blessing people through our home. What would God ever do with that? I've lost my purpose and I have no plan. And she punched me in the arm and she said, oh, but Ruth, you know how to make a charcuterie board. So we got a great laugh. And if you ever see my book and you open it, the first page you'll see is a charcuterie board. So I'm going to fast forward us another month. I'm invited to a Women of Legacy conference down at the Museum of the Bible. My friend, Wendy Rogers, was speaking at it. And she says, Ruth, I'd like you to join me at this conference. And I said, oh, no, I don't belong at that conference. These are high net worth women of, they own big business. This is just not where I belong. And she said, no, please just stay in my room with me. I come down there. I'm praying the whole way down there because I knew I shouldn't be leaving my kids at the time. And this was going to be a waste of my time. So I get into the Trump Hotel. Have you heard this story?
I want to hear it again, though. Okay, it's so important.
I get into
I love this story.
And everyone I know is sitting there having a drink. There's one seat open. And I sit next to this beautiful, very statuesque tall woman. And we start to have a conversation. And she starts to cry. And I said, are you okay? And she said, you're my divine appointment. I said, divine appointment for what? And she said, I was on the plane on my way here. And I said, Lord, I don't want to be there unless you have a divine appointment for me. She goes to get a drink. Sally leans over to me. Sally Lloyd Jones is there. And she says, do you know who that is? And I said, I have no idea. She said, Sarah Perot. I said, that still doesn't ring any bells for me. And she said, I don't remember what she said, but Sarah came back. We continued to talk. Well, I didn't see Sarah very much for the rest of the conference. And that conference ends. Now I'm going to take you a month longer. And each one of these things you're going to see, oh my gosh, someday God's going to show us a tapestry that's going to blow our mind. He's going to show us the back.
100%.
And this is a story of the back. So I get home and I'm hosting a wedding for about 350 people at my house. And I get chronic migraines. And I have my whole life. And this is the day after, so it's Sunday, and I'm laying on my kitchen floor and my husband is rubbing my head. And my phone starts to beep. And I said, who is it? He said, it's Sarah Perot. I said, what does Sarah want? She wants you in London tomorrow. I said, I can't go to London tomorrow. He said, no, she's hosting something she wants you to be at and she'd like you to come. And I said, no. So he's rubbing my head. I mean, I can't even see past the next second. I've just had 350 people at my house. So he said, well, you're not even praying about this. He proceeds to pray. Her next text is, I'm bringing you here. And I said, okay, then I'll come Tuesday. So I get picked up in London. And the gentleman who picks me up said, oh, you missed your party at the Buck. I said, what's the Buck? He said, the Buckingham Palace.
My goodness.
That was for God. But anyway, it was one of those moments where I felt like I was Cinderella entering a hole, but again, the back of the quilt. So I get to her house and Sally came as well. We spend the week together. On our final day, Sarah says, I'd like to take you both to my favorite farm in the Cotswolds. So we go to this farm in the Cotswolds, and she says to me, why did you even bother unpacking in every home if you knew you were going to move in 18 months? And I said, well, everyone's hungry for home. They both pick up their computers at the same time. And Sarah says to Sally, it's not taken yet. And I said, what's not taken? And they said the name. And I said, for what? And they said, the book you're going to write. I said, oh, no. If there is one thing I've always known, it was that I would not write a book. There are books written about people in our family. And my family has written a number of books. And I've always, at our family reunions, I have to have a table to put out all the books. And it just was something I didn't think I had anything to say, nor the ability to say. So for the rest of the trip, they're bothering me constantly. You're going to write a book. So I get home. This is going somewhere, I promise.
I love it.
You're
doing great.
Who lives on our property, walks over. Are you familiar with Bethel?
What Bethel are you speaking
Bethel
of?
in Reading?
I'm not.
Okay. Doesn't matter. She walks over, from my guest house, and she says, how was your week? And I said, oh, you're going to laugh. They think I need to write a book. And she starts crying instantly and says, you're supposed to do this. I said, Natasha, I'm not writing a book. She said, would you speak to one of my friends who's an author? Just have a conversation with her. Tell her your story. So I get on the phone with her friend, Jessica, who proceeds to ask me all sorts of questions. And she said, this is bigger than you. May I fly out there this week and talk to you? I said, Jessica, you're welcome to do that, but I'm not writing a book. She flies out that week. She spends the week with my family. At the end of the week, this is a Friday night, she says, I'd like to collaborate with you and write a book. I said, I'm not going to do it. The next day, now this is where it all comes together. The next day, I'm sitting on the same couch I had been sitting with Uncle Hubert. In walks Natasha and Jessica. And Jessica has 2 wrapped presents. And she hands me the first. And I open it, and it's a teapot. And she said, for all the times you're asking the Lord for that vision beyond your resources, I want you to have a cup of tea. And I started laughing, and I said, Jessica, for the 100th time, I'm not writing a book, and I don't drink tea. And, it had become a joke. Now, I want to stop there because the teapot was from a place called Terrain. I don't know if you're familiar with Terrain. They're huge. They're owned by Anthropology, a huge outdoor gardening design store. Probably my favorite that I've ever been to. It's from there. Guess who 3 years later approached me and became my first partner? Terrain.
Oh.
Anyway, the Lord, I'm telling you, I have to stop right there and share that because He's in the details. So I go to open the second gift, and she said, before you unwrap it, I had your sister drive me to all the gardening stores, decorating stores, bookstores in your town. I wanted to see if I could find a coffee table book or a book that, if now that I know you, if you did a book, what would it be like? So I thought, this will be interesting. I open up the book and I said to her, where is this place? She said, I don't know. We open it up. It's the farm in the Cotswolds outside of London. The chances of that are 0. Nobody knew where I had gone. Nobody knew where Sarah had taken me. Nobody knew anything.
Incredible.
I burst into tears, literally instantaneously. I got on my knees in front of everybody. And I said, Lord, I will do it. But I don't know what to do. I don't know what to say. I don't think I have the means to do it. What are all the things Uncle Hubert had asked me to pray for beyond my financial means, my personal capital, and my education? Here I am throwing out every reason why I'm not the one for the Lord to, for me to do this. In fact, I was on a podcast with Bob Goff, and he said to me, why don't you tell our listeners how you knew you wanted to be an author? And I started laughing, and I was like, you know how C.S. Lewis says he was the most reluctant convert? I was the most reluctant author. And so anyways, what she did was she put an app on my phone, and for 6 straight months, every Monday, she would send me a series of questions. I would speak into my phone. It would download onto her computer, and we would begin to work together. I had a friend come take 33,000 photos over COVID. We then culled that down to 1,000, and my sister and I sat and cut and pasted 300 pages of this thing. At the end of this, it's Labor Day weekend. I'm sitting in the kitchen with my husband. He has 2 stacks of my book with the pictures, like cut and pasted everything, 2 stacks. My friend Wendy called. Now, where was Wendy? Wendy was the first one that said, come, Women of Legacy. She calls me and says, where are you publishing this? I said, I don't know. I don't know what I'm doing. She said, okay, I'm going to put you on a phone call, a Zoom call right now with the person who wrote Purpose Driven Life with Rick Warren. Literally Zoom call, boom, right there. I'm on a call with him for an extended period of time, and he says to me, well, what's your social media? I said, I don't have any. He said, yeah, it's clear you're not a household name either. And I said, no, sir. He said, you need, given where the publishing industry is right now, you're going to have to self-publish this book. Nobody will touch you because you're not bringing along a marketing behind you. Well, I hang up with him. I'm sitting there with my husband. He says, what are you going to do? I said, I'm not self-publishing. I'm done. And I said, I think the Lord just wanted to see if I would obey him. And my husband said, again, you have not prayed.
Oh.
So he prays. At the end of his prayer, he looks at me and he said, I think my new paddle, which is like tennis in the winter, my new paddle partner from South Africa just bought a printing company. Let me call him. He calls Michael. He said, do you do books? Michael said, I don't know. I'll call you right back. 10 minutes later, he calls back. We do books. I'll have it ready in 6 weeks at cost. Have Ruth in the boardroom tomorrow. I will have the head of every department meet with her. When I tell you, I can't take credit for anything from A to Z. In fact, he drugged me all the way. When the show came to me and wanted to do a show, I said no. When I tell you, it is fascinating. I'm so grateful that he doesn't get impatient with me because I don't have the confidence to walk in spaces that I'm unfamiliar in. And he has taken me so far out of my lane for the last 3 years. So anyway, that's been my story leading up to the show.
I can't articulate how proud I am of you and how many tears you brought to my eyes listening to you. I'm amazed at our Heavenly Father and how he has taken you on this huge journey, and He's using you in mighty, mighty ways to advance his kingdom. But Ruth, you said yes to him, and you kept taking one step after the next. And the thing that brought me the most tears is you obeyed him. You obeyed him. Has it been so fun to look back? And now, as much work, what is it like to look back? And I do want to say for the listeners, I want to give away as a Christmas present to 5 listeners. I'm going to purchase 5 of your books. So if people want to text me or direct message me, we're going to do a drawing for 5 of Ruth's books. But I'm so incredibly proud of your book and how inspiring it is. But when you look back and you obeyed the Lord, tell us what that feels like.
This is where I will cry, right? Because there's a reason he told the Israelites to remember his faithfulness. Because it hasn't ended. That prayer of, Lord, give me a vision beyond your resources. It wasn't just about the book. It's setting the stage for even deeper waters that he's led me into. And if I didn't have the rear view mirror to see his faithfulness, I don't know that I'd have the courage to keep going. So it's with fear and trepidation. I'll tell you, I've sat on my bed before and just said, Lord, please help my fear and insecurities and my hopes and dreams, because they're all a big hot mess. And I don't really know. I'm not smart enough to know exactly the right direction you're calling me. So shut the doors that need to be shut and push me through the ones I need to be pushed through, because I'm not chasing something. So it's a very different, I have a friend, Harvard MBA. He's like, what's your business plan? What's all? And I'm like, are you kidding me? I'm a stay-at-home mom for the last 18 years of taking kids to swim practice and football practice. This wasn't my plan. And so, but there's this weird, tension of, but you've given me something to steward. So help me to steward it well when I don't even know what it is. Right. And so, when they initially called me, because I had some producers call me a few years ago and asked me to do a show, and we had several meetings, and it was the final meeting before they were coming to film a sizzle reel. I didn't even know what a sizzle reel was. And he said, we just pitched you as Chanel Meets the Farm to Peacock. And I said, well, what's Peacock, number 1? Number 2, everyone needs to stop. The answer is no. And he said, what do you mean no? And I said, I'm not Chanel Meets the Farm. And he said, you have to have a hook in this industry. And I said, if I am not enough, this is not. And he said, why did you write your book? And I said, because I believe our nation's divided and so are the homes. And if I can give practical tools to families all day long, that's what I'll do. And he said, I couldn't agree more. If you work with us, you may never say that again. So right then I knew the Lord had protected me from something. So when Homeworthy contacted me, someone had given the CEO of Homeworthy my book, and she had been a producer of Good Morning America and had left to start Homeworthy. And for those who aren't familiar with Homeworthy, they go into homes all over the world. Designers, Bunny Williams, just people all over, and give you their story and the story of the home. So she left me a message saying, I'd like to come in and interview you. I quickly Googled Homeworthy because I wasn't familiar with it. And I saw that it was high design. And I left her a message and I said, no, thank you. So she called me back and said, why are you saying no? And I said, I've seen that's just not who I am. We go to garage sales, estate sales. And she said, we want your story. Would you please just let me come with my camera? She filmed that initial one and it hit 1 million relatively quickly. It's their number 1 of all time, and Bunny Williams is number 2. So they called me about 1.5 years to 2 years ago, and she said, would you be willing to speak with my husband? And I said, sure. She said, well, let me tell you who he is before he gets on the phone. She said, he's a producer for Disney and ABC. So he gets on the phone and he said, do you know who Diane Sawyer is? And I said, yes. He said, well, I used to produce her show. He said, you're her favorite episode and you're my favorite episode. Would you do your own show? And I said, no, thank you. And he said, what can we do to convince you? And I said, with all due respect, sir, I don't know what I have to offer you. I'm a stay-at-home mom. I mean, I had lost all confidence in anything past baking cookies in my kitchen. So he said, we'll let you do anything. And I said, will you let me pray for 2 weeks about this? So he goes, pray? And I said, yes. So he called me back 2 weeks later and he said, are you done praying? And I said, yes, sir. And he said, well, what's your answer? And I said, I just don't know how I can be a benefit to you. But I do know that I won't do this if it doesn't benefit family. And he said, I will let you do anything you want. And I said, so if I pray on an episode, you're going to leave it? He said, 100%. And I've been doing a show with them for the last year and a half, and they don't take out anything. So again, I don't know where that's going. It could go nowhere. I just giggle. I'm like, Lord, I couldn't stand up in front of 2 people before practicing law, and you have me filming in my kitchen every week. You know what I'm saying? So it's just been a crazy, only God story. And I don't know what he's going to do or not do next, but I do know I have to keep looking back and seeing his faithfulness, or I won't have the courage to take the next step.
Ruth, the first time I heard you speak, what amazed me most about you is just how genuine you are, and you have no agenda. And I think the secret sauce of where the Lord's had a lot of favor in your life is this has never been about you. You have literally prayed for doors to open, prayed for doors to close, and you have just said, Lord, here I am, and may your will be done. And he's just used you in mighty ways. Like this book, Hungry for Home, it's an incredible book. There's so much fun and intention, and there is many levels to how special it is. Your show, all that you're doing on social media, all that you're doing with your home. And I think the lesson for a lot of us is to just be open to obeying and then have no agenda, and may the Lord's will be done. May he open and close the doors. The other thing I love about you, when I watch you on social media, this is a compliment, not a put down. It's part of your secret sauce. You might have like 3 hairs out of place. And
three is giving me a lot of credit.
But that's what I love about you. You are beautiful inside and out, but you don't have to show up perfect. You show up as Ruth with all of your heart. It's not about you. It's about making a difference in the lives of others. And it's just so clear to me, God's just used you in mighty ways. And so I think for our listeners, just to show up with open hands and obey.
And I think, when you have the courage to pray that prayer, he will take you to places you are not enough. And that's the whole purpose. For you to understand the mighty God you serve, he plans on doing things through you and with you that you can't even wrap your head around. And I can speak personally, we can limit him in ways where he just shakes his head, I think, and says, just let me. And it's very hard. Your point on social media, you need to understand how much I hate social media. And so I had gotten all these texts from women saying, what kind of makeup do you use? What kind of skincare? So I was doing this Instagram thing and I said, okay, everybody wants to know. I'm going to tell you what I use. And I lay it all out there. And then I said, now I'm turning off my ring light. And I turn off the ring light. And I was like, now you see, I look exactly like you. I have lines. I have, sunspots. Stop with the nonsense. Stop. Same thing. I did one on the house because everyone's like, everything's so perfect. And I did this whole thing on, you see through a pinhole what I have curated for you to see. You don't see my kids arguing in that side of the room, or my husband's mad at me because I made him take his glasses off for the episode, or I have just burned the entire dinner and my kids are like, how can you have a show when you burn our dinner? You don't see all of that. And so if I can encourage women too, oh my gosh, comparison is the thief of all joy. And so I don't want to be a part of that. And so to me, it's important for you to see how incredibly imperfect I am. I recently watched Martha Stewart's Netflix, biography. My statement for the last few years has been perfectly imperfect. I didn't know hers was perfectly perfect. I had no idea. So I'm watching it and I was like, that's why I never understood you, right? Because I can never be perfect. So anyway, yeah, I appreciate you saying that. It is definitely with fear and trepidation that I have taken every step I've taken. So I would covet your prayers as I continue to say, Lord, what's next? I don't know. I've had so many amazing speaking opportunities this year, and next year's kind of quiet at this point. And so you sit there and go, okay, Lord, maybe you're done with me. Or he's just giving me a short season of rest to prepare me for what's next. So,
Ruth, I love your vulnerability where you are the first to say you're imperfect, but I also love your humble confidence where you have said, Lord, I will show up and obey you. And you open and close those doors. And I think it's such a great reminder to all of us to step out in faith. And if the Lord is speaking to us, say yes. And we're going to pray. We're definitely going to pray for you. A couple more things I could ask you. I'd love to ask you 100 more things, but I just have a few more for today. Let's go back to your uncle. And it reminds me in our own families, and this isn't easy, but Ruth, your uncle loved you enough to ask you a super, super tough question. And I think with Christmas right around the corner, it reminds me, let's not be afraid to love on people, to ask the tough questions of people. And I love that he loved you enough to ask that tough question.
I love that. And when I speak, I often say, do you have somebody who loves you enough to radically challenge you? And it's that intersection, right, of loving you directly and loving you and challenging you directly. And it takes humility to hear it too. And here's the thing with Uncle Hubert, he had enough currency in the bank with me that I trusted his question. And I think that it wasn't like somebody who barely knew me who came up and challenged me. It was somebody who I knew loved me and was willing to ask me a hard question. So even entering, into these holidays, I think the focus is love people really well. And that will earn you currency to ask hard questions. And if you're on the opposite side of it, be humble enough to say, Lord, are you trying to speak through somebody to me? And what about this? Because I could have said, what is he talking about? I just lost my mother. My brother has a heart condition. I have 5 kids. We're flipping houses. Of course I'm dependent on the Lord. But I had to, with humility, say, what is God really asking me? And that took a lot of courage for me too. So.
That's amazing wisdom and a great reminder to us to receive the tough questions from other people with grace and to ask the tough questions. Ruth, you have said in another podcast that I listened to that you write a letter at Christmas time to your family members. I hate to steal that from you, but I loved that so much. Will you inspire us? Tell us a little bit about that, because I think of all the things that you could say about creating a Christmas feeling, but I want you to talk about, and you don't have to spend money, but what those words mean to someone else when they receive that letter. Tell people about the tradition that you have. People might want to start this tradition.
We have this both for Christmas as well as for birthdays. For birthdays, we fill a room with 100 balloons while they sleep, and we wrap their door in love letters. And so when they wake up, they know how deeply they are loved. We do the same Christmas morning. So every person in our family writes each other a letter. Those are opened before any gifts are opened. And sometimes it's with the intent of talking about things in areas you've seen growth in that year, or it could just be the reasons you love them so much. But, again, if my whole intent, remember I said earlier, your goal can be this, right? But if you don't start to do things, commit to things that move you in that direction, you can't reach it. So that, knowing that one of my goals was a strong, healthy family unit, I put into place with Bob opportunities for people to tell each other how much they loved each other and why. We don't spend much time doing that. The night of birthdays, we go around the table and literally for about an hour speak into that person who's having a birthday. So it's basically just an extension of that. And I've seen the fruit as my kids have gotten. And again, it doesn't take money to buy a gift. I mean, I think those are the most beautiful things we do on Christmas morning next to reading the story of Christ. So,
Ruth, you are so full of wisdom. Like, you have given us 100 mic drops in this 1 hour. Like, your authenticity, and you just speak from the heart, and you are just so full of wisdom. And I couldn't be more thankful. You'll never know the ripples that I will take from you, the ripples that other people will take from you. Someday, God willing, if you're willing, we're going to want to do a part 2, because I know you have a rock star dad. Is he still alive?
He is. He lives on our property, and he's 77. He's amazing. Yeah, I could have him on one with us, right?
I would love to do that. I want to hear someday about who your mom was. I know she was a huge part of your life, and I'd love to hear more about those 5 kids. I believe you're the oldest of 6 kids. There is layer upon layer upon layer to you and Bob and the kingdom work that you're doing. And there's so much I'd like to say, but I just have 2 more things. Ruth, tell people how to follow you, how to find you. You're so inspiring. Tell them the different ways. And again, Hungry for Home. Order her book. People, let me know if you're listening, because we're going to have a drawing and I'm going to purchase 5 books. But we want people to follow you on social media. We want them to be able to watch your show. You have an amazing e-newsletter that I get, and you just inspire people. That is what you do. You advance the kingdom and you inspire people. And I'm so grateful.
Thank you. So Hungry for Home on Instagram, where I drop my Tip Tuesdays, or I have other things throughout the week. www.hungry4home.com is my website where the book can be ordered. It can also be ordered on Amazon. And then I have 2 shows, one with Homeworthy, that's called At Home with Ruth McKeaney. But you can also just type in Homeworthy Ruth McKeaney, and that initial episode will also come up. And then I have my own YouTube, just called Hungry for Home on YouTube, where I have conversations with Bob, or I'm cooking, or different things. So those are the different ways that you can reach me. And I would covet your prayers for what things I'm working on and what the Lord has next.
We're going to pray for you. And I have to tell you, I wore kind of my Christmas gear for you. I have some red Minnesota boots. We just had a lot of snow, and Christmas is right around the corner. Are you excited for Christmas?
Yes.
What are you most excited for?
We're all going to be together. So that's what I'm most excited for. We're all going to be together.
And I know it with all of my heart. You're an incredible mom.
Thank you.
An incredible wife. And thank you so much again for all of the kingdom work and for inspiring us, and all the yeses to the Lord. You'll never be able, Ruth, to measure your ripples. We're so grateful for the person that you are. My last question for today, on the One Pebble podcast, we allow the guest to throw out the last pebble. And You can say whatever you want to say to encourage our listeners, but maybe for the person out there that is wondering kind of what their next why is, or they're just going through life waiting on the Lord, what would be your encouragement to them?
Oh, take a step. I think, it's kind of like the topic of forgiveness. We might not have the desire, but obedience precedes the desire. And often to me, obedience is just taking that tentative step and just saying, Lord, I'm not enough. And I would also say to somebody who just heard, when you said you're an incredible mom and incredible wife, I fail a lot. And so I want to encourage people who think, well, I didn't do this as a mom. You're going to be a grandparent. You get to start over. You get to give wisdom of your failures. The Lord's not going to waste your failures. I love, for me, what I have seen is those areas of struggle and failure become my superpower. Because if you're willing to be vulnerable and authentic about those and God's provision and faithfulness through them, He gets to use those to bless people. So don't be afraid of having missed the boat. You get to start it right now. And I think that's what I would leave with people.
That is so beautiful. Ruth, it's been so fun to tap into your heart. And at the beginning, before we started to record, I said, Ruth, you just be Ruth and speak from your heart. And you have just spoke from your heart again. You just gave us in 1 hour 100 different ways to be a more sharpened person. Thank you so much for your generosity of time and sharing your heart. And iron sharpens iron. This has been so much fun. You've sharpened me. I know that you're going to sharpen the listeners, and we've had so much fun. We're going to pray for you, and we're wildly cheering you on. Thank you for who you are. Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
This has been the One Pebble Podcast. One pebble, so many ripples. What will you do to make a difference?